When it comes to lighting an interview, I don't start by simply asking myself where I should place the lights. Before a single piece of equipment comes out of its case, I need to understand what the location has to offer and develop a plan to use its strength to create an image that serves the story and my client's objectives. In this video, I'll walk you through my entire thought process on this recent job, from evaluating the location to shaping the light, and show you how I use a location strength to intentionally craft an image rather than simply light a room. Let's dive right in. Lighting is here to support your vision, not to dictate it. Meaning, it's not about just putting lights where you think they're going to be and then just say, well, that's what the image looked like. It's about you deciding before you put a light out what kind of image you want to create and then setting up your light to support that image. I recently shot a project for a highly successful team of wealth managers. My goal was to create an image that immediately communicated professionalism, intelligence, and success while still feeling warm, inviting, and approachable. One thing that I've learned over the years is that lighting begins with really observing. And so every time I get to a location, I have to go through a full process of first evaluating the space and learning what the space has to offer and how I can use that to my advantage, for the advantage of the story, for the advantage of my clients' objectives. You know, they rented this space, ton of daylight. As you can see, there's window not only on this wall, but actually like where that picture is taken from, like behind me. The only downside that I would identify right away with a space like this is because there's so much daylight, it kind of floods everything and there's a lack of contrast. Because if I would take a picture before doing anything and put the false colors, everything will almost be at the same levels because it's just flooded with daylight. And so that could be a challenge. The other thing to consider is the direction of the light. Where is the light coming from? And with those big windows, it's forcing me to position my subject in a way that is going to make this side the key side. I want to use the natural light as the key side on my subject, not the fill side. Because so that means they're going to be, if they're sitting where that black chair is, I want them to kind of look this way so that the bright side of their face makes sense with the window. And I have to do that because if I decide to do it the other way, meaning I now want them to look this way with the camera looking that way, I have to block that natural light from hitting their face. I could, probably not super well with what I have, but I could. My question would be why? Why are you not using this beautiful natural light that's coming through? And why are you instead fighting it, removing it from your subject to then light up the key side, which would then be on this side? So you would put a light here shining on this side. And you're just creating a lot more work for yourself for a result that's just not going to look as natural as if you use the natural light. The other thing that I would see rather quickly is those lights up on the ceiling. And when I see lights like this, I want to know right away whether I have control over those lights or not. And in this particular case, we had no control over those lights. They're going to need to stay on. And so that's something that I need to be aware of, understand how it affects the image. Obviously, there's a color temperature difference between those light bulbs and the outdoor. It looks like they're a lot warmer, which is fine because it makes the whole picture a little warmer. But I need to be aware of that to understand that I'm going to have to adjust my color temperature in order to make this work. When I first put the camera up, I really liked seeing the window in the shot. Actually added to depth and also added as motivation lighting. It tells me this is where this light is coming from, and that's why she's looking the way she's looking. And so it's not necessary, right? We've talked about motivated versus unmotivated lighting. A lot of people like unmotivated lighting, and that's fine. I feel like in this particular case, for me, I liked what it did. Instead of being in this closed, room or hallway, then I see infinite, right? I see openness, and I like the way it communicated. So, but it's always tricky. It's always too tricky for me, at least, to put a window in the shot because, again, I don't control it. And I have very little tools with me to deal with any change through that window. Now, because the sky is overcast, there's also nothing nice looking outside that window. There's no view. Now, I've done many shots like this in Manhattan on, like the 82nd floor of a tower, and it would be a bummer to blow out the window because you have the whole view of Manhattan, for example. Or maybe there's an ocean back there, whatever it is. That might be something valuable to show. In this particular case, there is nothing there. The sky is completely gray. And so I have to I made the decision of we're going to blow out the window. Exposure and lighting always work together. It's very hard to separate the two. It's not like I'm going to do all my lighting first and then I'm going to deal with exposure. It kind of works hand in hand. And so those decisions happen at the same time very quickly. And when you make the decision to keep the window in the frame, to blow out the window, then it triggers some thoughts on how you're going to achieve that on the exposure side and what you need to do on the exposure side. By adding ND filters from the very beginning, then all I'm going to do is roll more or less ND filters if something change, and all my levels are going to move together, and none of the image is actually going to be affected outside of the levels. The depth of field stays the same. My shutter speed doesn't change. And so I don't have to add or switch to the high base or whatever. So that's a great way of working. So if we look at false color, all I did was add ND filters and try to maintain 100% or close to 100% on that window. And once I get to that place, then my camera is kind of set. I'm not going to touch it anymore. And now it's all about placing lights so that we can shape it and get the levels that we need around that window. We've kind of set the overall levels for the room. And so now I look at the monitor knowing how much light I still need to add to the subject in order for her to be exposed properly. Recently, I've really enjoyed working with my 4x6 diffuser, and it's just a frame and Velcro the diffuser on top of it. And it does a few things for me. Obviously, it's a great way to control harsh light, and I can move the light away from the frame, from the diffuser, and create something even softer, or I can bring it closer to the diffuser and create a light source that's a little harsher. The fact that it's the 4x6 and I put it vertically gives me better coverage. So instead of having just kind of like a small softbox around their face. And then the last thing that it does is, because of those windows, it actually filters any kind of daylight that's coming through those windows onto my subject this way. Now, obviously, it's not controlling the rest of the windows, but the ones that are in that direction are now also being filtered by this diffuser, create even a softer light coming through the window for my subject. All we're doing with the key light here is supplementing the daylight on the key side to have control over the levels. We're adding a little bit of levels to make sure that she's exposed properly. And I'm either gonna have somebody from my crew adjust the intensity of that light, the key light, or I'm going to use the app on my phone until I get the levels that I want on her face. So now that we have the key light on her to the levels that we want, those top lights are shining directly or somewhat directly on my subject, and it's just having a negative effect. And so very simply, I put a small block, a small negative right above my subject. That's blocking at least the light from hitting her. It also provides some negative fill on my subject. And so I'm not going to get a lot of contrast on her. I could add a little bit more by putting a neg closer to her. So like if we look at the setup here, I could have placed, like I have a 4x8 negative that I could have put right next to her to remove some of the light. I could even move it a little bit to the front, you know, kind of here, to block some of the light coming from the windows behind camera. And that would have added a little bit more contrast. So what you see here is all backlight, which I love, here as well on the chair. And that's placing my tube light as the backlight. And what this really does, the reason why it's important, especially with her, is her hair really is close to this background. If you didn't have this brighter area, her hair would blend completely with that bookshelf. And so that's what that backlight is for. It's really to kind of highlight this small area, this small line, and create that separation between your subject and the background. And in this particular case, it worked really well. I also needed to raise the levels a little bit on the bookshelf. It was a little dark after adding the ND filter. And so I felt like if I could raise the levels a little bit, it would be helpful. So I decided to use my Halo 100X with my softbox to shine some levels on that bookshelf. And we had some conversation, and I made the decision to place that light at an angle to mimic the window, not to go against the window, because again, it would look unnatural if for some reason on our shot we could tell that there was a light source coming this way. So like if this area of the bookshelves was brighter than this side of the bookshelf, it would look unnatural. And for me, the shadows were great because it would look natural. If the light is coming from that window, which it is, I would have those shadows and it will look a lot more natural. And now again, I'm creating contrast in my image versus the whole bookshelf being all at the same level. And I understand that every location is different. Like this is very unusual for me to have a location that looks this good. Typically I'm stuck in a conference room in a very empty office or something very ugly, and I don't have a lot of things to play with. The goal isn't to force every location into the same look. It's to understand its strength, recognize its limitation, and use the tool that you have to intentionally create the strongest image possible. And that's what cinematography is all about. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and happy filming.